Welcome to the True Crime Digest channel. Today, we will explore one of the most horrific cases that occurred in a peaceful neighborhood, where the safety of residents was disrupted by an unimaginable crime. This is the story of Marty Hill, a warm-hearted, talented woman and a devoted mother. On September 8, 2010, everything seemed to be normal. Marty, an outstanding employee at a garment manufacturing company, mysteriously disappeared. Her absence from an important production meeting raised concerns among her colleagues and family. No one could have imagined that her disappearance would mark the beginning of a tense investigation, filled with mysteries and unexpected twists. Marty was not only a reliable employee, but also a friend, a mother, and a passionate woman at work. As news of her disappearance spread, people began to suspect that something was wrong. What they were about to discover would send shivers down their spines. This story would not only be about searching for a victim, but also about the fight for justice, for a loving woman and mother who had endured an unforgettable horror. On September 8, 2010, what seemed like an ordinary day turned into a nightmare. Marty was absent from the production meeting at 10 a.m., which was extremely unusual. Her colleagues, who were accustomed to her dependable presence, began to feel anxious. Something was amiss. After the meeting, a colleague attempted to contact her through text messages and calls, but received no response. Feeling worried, this person decided to drive to Marty's house to check on her. Upon arrival, Marty's car was still parked in the driveway. However, when they knocked on the door, no one answered. This deepened their anxiety. Upon entering, they discovered the house appeared empty. The colleague began to feel uneasy. Why isn't she home? What happened? These thoughts quickly led to the decision to call the police. They could not sit idly by knowing that a friend, a colleague, might be in danger. When the police arrived, they also sensed that something was off. The door was unlocked, and everything seemed normal until they stepped inside. They checked every nook and cranny of the house but found no signs of Marty. The anxiety among everyone intensified. Then, when the officers descended to the basement, they discovered a horrifying scene. Marty lay there, in critical condition, on the floor, covered in blood. It was like a nightmare. She was curled up in a fetal position, unconscious, with severe injuries on her body. The police quickly called for emergency assistance and began first aid. Marty's situation was very serious. Her neck wounds indicated a brutal attack. It appeared she had been strangled before being assaulted with other weapons. When she was taken to the hospital, her family and friends rushed to her side, worried and praying for her survival. While the doctors worked tirelessly, the police began to investigate further. They knew finding the perpetrator was crucial. They sought every clue and piece of information from colleagues, friends, and family to gain a clearer picture of Marty's life. Who could want to harm her? They started with Marty's ex-husband, Steve Hill. There were indications that Marty and Steve had had recent conversations. They shared a complicated past. And could the anger from their old relationship lead to such a brutal act? The police sought out Steve for more information. Steve insisted that he loved Marty and would never hurt her. "I just want to know who did this to her," he said in a panic. This led the police to believe they might be following the wrong lead. As the investigation deepened, police began to feel that there could be another suspect, Brian Pennington, the contractor who had worked on Marty's home. They had found clues from some colleagues and family that Brian might have exhibited strange behavior. Why was he at Marty's house on the morning of September 8th? The quest for the truth was just beginning, and what the police were about to uncover would change everything forever. Who was truly behind this attack? Would Marty survive and return to her family? Those questions would soon be answered in the next part of the story. The story continues with the intense investigation by the police to determine who was behind the brutal attack on Marty Hill. After gathering initial information, they found that Brian Pennington, a contractor who had worked for Marty, could be the main suspect in this case. Brian was a 26-year-old man living about an hour and a half from Marty's house. When the police arrived to interview him, they couldn't help but notice the scratches on his face. It was from a dog, Brian explained, but his expression was not convincing. The scratches did not resemble those from an animal, but appeared to be signs of a struggle. The police felt that something was off. Brian had shown them the scratches, but his demeanor seemed to calm under suspicion. Could it be that he was hiding something? They decided to collect more evidence and inspect items in his home. When they examined Brian's clothing, a notable discovery emerged. A pair of jeans with bloodstains was found at the bottom of the laundry hamper, just 30 minutes after submitting the sample to the lab. Results confirmed that it was indeed the blood of Marty Hill. This was undeniable evidence against Brian. Meanwhile, another situation unfolded. Jessica, Brian's wife, was interviewed about her husband's presence during the time of the attack. Initially, she stated he had been home the entire day, but when placed under greater pressure, Jessica began to seem uncertain. The police saw an opportunity to further explore the possible motives behind such a brutal act. When Jessica learned about Marty's serious injuries, an awakening occurred within her. She realized that the truth needed to be told. Under pressure, Jessica admitted that Brian had not been home during the time of the attack. Her testimony was a major turning point in the investigation. The police quickly gathered enough information to issue an arrest warrant for Brian. On September 13th, just 5 days after the attack, Brian was taken into custody on charges of attempted murder. This action was not only a victory for law enforcement, but also a glimmer of hope for Marty's family. They wanted to see the attacker brought to justice for what had happened to their loved one. What began as a normal life had turned into an unimaginable nightmare. Everyone felt anger and outrage at Brian's brutal actions. They couldn't understand how a seemingly normal person could become this way. Everyone united in their desire to uncover the truth and support her family. During this difficult time, the love and support from the community became a beacon of hope in the darkest days. As the trial commenced, the atmosphere in the courtroom became heavy. Marty, although still in recovery, decided to face Brian Pennington, the man who attacked her. Her courage was truly admirable. She entered the courtroom, frail but with determined eyes. She knew this was her opportunity to speak out and reclaim her power from the person who had hurt her. Brian sat there with a cold expression, showing no emotion. He seemed indifferent to the suffering he had caused. This made everyone in the room feel furious. They could not understand how someone could be so cruel. Brian's defense attorney attempted to justify his actions. They claimed that Brian was not a violent person, but merely a man facing difficulties in life. However, those arguments failed to persuade anyone. Regardless, the truth remained the same. Brian had brutally attacked Marty and left her with injuries that would never be forgotten. Throughout the trial, Marty faced difficult questions. She had to recount what had happened to her on that fateful day. Emotions surged as she recalled the worst moment of her life. She described in detail the attack, the suffocating feeling as Brian strangled her, and the fear that she might not survive. When Marty identified Brian as her attacker, the courtroom erupted. She had regained control of her life. But what happened next shocked everyone. Jessica, Brian's wife, was called as a witness. Everyone was eager to hear what she would say. Jessica admitted that Brian had not been home during the time of the attack. Her testimony was a major shock to the defense team. She also recounted instances of Brian's past violence against her. Jessica's testimony not only solidified the evidence against Brian, but also revealed a dark history that no one knew about. Finally, the trial concluded with the jury's verdict. Brian Pennington was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to 28.5 years in prison. When the verdict was announced, many in the courtroom burst into joyous celebration. They had awaited this day for so long, and finally, justice had been served. For Marty's family, This was not just a victory in the fight for justice. It was a significant step in the healing process. They had endured much pain from the psychological and physical trauma, but now they could begin to move forward. However, lingering questions remained. Why did Brian act this way? What motive lay behind his brutal actions? These questions would forever haunt family members, as well as those who had followed the case. Looking back at the story of Marty Hill, we see that this is not merely a criminal case, but also a lesson in courage, perseverance, and love. Life can be incredibly challenging, but as Marty has shown, we can overcome any obstacles if we do not give up. Although the attacker has been brought to light and received appropriate punishment, the pain and memories will always remain in the hearts of those who loved her. However, what is crucial is that they do not face this alone. The community, family, and friends stood by them, supporting them on the path to recovery. We must remember that, in this life, the safety of each person is paramount. Let's protect each other and always be vigilant about what happens around us. This not only helps safeguard ourselves, but also protects those we love. Marty's story is a reminder that even when life leads us into the worst circumstances, the light can still find its way back. Let's live positively, protect one another, and always fight for justice. We will meet again in the next stories, where light and truth will continue to shine.